The House will come to order. The chair recognizes Majority Floor Leader Lowers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Continuing on the order of third reading of bills, I move the House take up calendar item number 13, House Bill 4416.
Without objection, so ordered. The clerk will read.
Calendar item number 13, House Bill number 4416, introduced by Representative Hoyninga. A bill to amend the Michigan Penal Code. People of the State of Michigan, enact.
Without objection, the bill will be considered read for a third time by its title. Are there amendments? There being no amendments, the question before the House is the passage of the bill. Members, if I may have your attention, we have a series of speakers that will be addressing us on the question before the House. Wishing to speak on the question before the House, the chair recognizes Representative Hoyninga.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to speak on HB 4416. I'll be brief, but I would like to first dispel any misconceptions on this bill. This bill does not eliminate background checks. This bill does not eliminate gun-free zones. This bill does not even eliminate CPLs. It simply provides Michigan citizens their constitutional right to carry. Fact, states with constitutional carry are some of the safest states in the nation. The sky is not going to fall, I promise, if this is passed. Permitless open carry is already lay of the land. Simply putting on a jacket should not unwittingly make you a felon.
Members, a colleague is addressing the body. Please keep order. The chair recognizes Representative Hoyninga.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I end with a quote from the Second Amendment of our Constitution. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Mr. Speaker, I encourage my colleagues to vote yes on HB 4416.
Thank you, Representative. The chair recognizes Representative Wittenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Permission to speak to the entire package?
Please keep your comments tailored to the bill that's currently before the House. Thank you, Representative.
I think I can do that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition today to House Bill 4416. And I'm going to try to refute some of the arguments that have been made and some of them that you'll hear after I speak. Now, like most rights, the rights secured by the Second Amendment are not unlimited. It's not a right to keep and carry any weapon whatsoever in any manner whatsoever for whatever purpose. But those aren't my words. Those are the words of one of the most conservative Supreme Court justices in our country's history, the late Justice Antonin Scalia, in his Heller decision of 2008. So it's not a contradiction to our Second Amendment to be sure certain safeguards are put in place. Excuse me. These bills, which can be referred to as permitless carry bills, will eliminate the requirement of taking a class and getting a license to conceal carry a weapon. The sponsors say that people can still take a class if they want, but how can we guarantee that? That's wishful thinking, that someone will pay to take a class that isn't required. Now, when I took my CPL class, it was taught by 2 police officers from my district, and one of them was actually the head of the SWAT team. And they even said the training was too short, and they recommended taking additional training. If it's not unreasonable to expect a young person to take a hunter's safety class before carrying a shotgun into the woods under his or her parents' supervision, then certainly it's not unreasonable to ask a person to take a class before carrying a loaded weapon into a crowded downtown area. And then you'll say that we can already open carry without a license. And I offered an amendment to bring the open carry standards up to the standards of concealed carry. Shouldn't we ensure that all citizens with a weapon know how to handle it? And another common thing that always comes up during this debate is that we should enforce the existing laws and not create new laws. But here we are. We have every law enforcement agency testifying in opposition to these bills, and still we're pushing to roll back the requirements. You can't purport to be a supporter of law enforcement and then work to undermine it. Michigan is a shall-issue state, so if you're not already disqualified from owning a weapon, then you will be able to get a weapon. This is not an undue burden. And the last one of the sponsors that said that 1 millimeter of clothing makes the difference between a criminal act and a legal act. And I would ask you, do you go to the beach naked? If you go to the beach and don't have that 1 millimeter of clothing on you, you're committing a criminal act. Does that mean we can all go to the beach naked then, based on that theory? There are rules in place, and these are the laws we have, and we have to abide by them. For all those reasons, I urge you to oppose this unnecessary and dangerous bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. The chair recognizes Representative Lisinski.
Thank you. I rise today in opposition to House Bill 4416. House Bill 4416 repeals the duty to obtain a concealed pistol license. These changes are dangerous for our law enforcement and dangerous for our families. As a law-abiding registered gun owner with a husband and son who are avid conservationists, sportsmen, and hunters, I honor and respect the Second Amendment. My community has spoken with a unified voice on House Bill 4416. My police chiefs, county sheriffs, parents, families, and even the concealed pistol license instructor at the hunt club, at the Chelsea Rod and Gun Club that my family have been members of for years, is opposed to House Bill 4416. All of them have stated that expanding concealed carry while simultaneously removing the training requirement, removing the duty to report a concealed weapon during an encounter with a law enforcement officer, and removing the unique factors that Michigan now requires for you to carry concealed, is nonsensical, dangerous, and not good for our community. So let's think about those unique factors. House Bill 4416 would remove the safeguards we have for the higher responsibility of carrying concealed. House Bill 4416 would allow a convicted stalker who has previously been barred from carrying concealed to carry at will. House Bill 4416 would allow a convicted abuser of a vulnerable adult to carry at will. These changes are dangerous for our law enforcement and dangerous for our families. I stand united with my local gun owners and law enforcement in opposition to House Bill 4416. Basic safeguards and training do not infringe on our legitimate rights. I ask that you join me in opposition.
Thank you, Representative. The chair recognizes Representative Glenn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would note that since statehood, the People's Republic of Vermont, Bernie Sandersville, has had this policy in effect, and I doubt there's any among us who looks at Vermont and perceives it to be a hotbed of gun violence. In the last decade, some dozen states throughout the country have joined Vermont in this recognition of our Second Amendment rights. And I would in fact note that there is no restriction on open carrying with or without training. And we are simply talking about the difference between legally openly carrying and carrying concealed is simply a matter of a piece of clothing. Those who openly carry know that in any kind of criminal or terrorist situation, they'd be likely to be the ones shot first. But one thing I would observe about these 12 states that in the last decade have joined Vermont in allowing for constitutional carry is that the data is fresh. And the data indicate that in these dozen states that gun violence has not increased. But what has increased in all 12 of these newly constitutional carry states is the number of people who voluntarily get training. Absent a government mandate, I'm unaware of any other policy that's been tried that has actually resulted in an increase in the number of citizens being trained. I note that the chief of police of the city of Detroit encourages his citizens to arm themselves and to be prepared in situations in which the police may not be able to respond as quickly as would be necessary. But I think the principle embodied in this package of legislation is that in an era when civil unrest and even violence in our streets is increasing, when we face the threat of terrorism, both domestic and foreign, in my opinion, the more law-abiding Americans who are able to carry weapons to defend themselves and their families and their property and their businesses, the better. It's not just something called freedom. It is a constitutional right guaranteed by the Bill of Rights adopted by our founding fathers. And I would encourage those on both sides of the aisle to do the same thing Vermont has done for over 200 years. Allow people, concealed or otherwise, to exercise that constitutional right. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. The chair recognizes Representative Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to thank my colleagues for beginning the work on this legislation. However, as the legislation stands currently, I'm unable to support it. These bills have absolutely no reason for being in our society. In every professional trade, there's an instructional period that takes place when someone learns to use a tool. Carpenters use hammers, and hammers are tools, but they can also be weapons. But before these carpenters go off to work, they learn how to use the hammer. They learn that they can break bones and hinder projects with one single stroke. Drivers operate vehicles. Vehicles are modes of transportation, but vehicles can also be weapons. But before these drivers go on the road, they learn how to operate the vehicle. And in a matter of seconds, they can take a life. Then we have firearms. And as the law currently stands, there is some training associated with the handling of a weapon if you would like to conceal it. The purpose of the class is to show you how incredibly difficult it is to make a split-second decision. Now, proponents of this change will say that they're standing up for the freedom of people to exercise their constitutional Second Amendment rights. But what about the freedom of people to live their lives, to be secure, and to not have to deal with the fear of gun violence? What about the young black and brown man like me, who are killed every day? And as a young black man who has to read articles in the newspaper and have to see clips on social media and hear interviews on the radio about senseless gun deaths that happen in neighborhoods like mine and yours, near and far across our state and others, my question is, why does one right take priority over another? Should another mother have to bury her child because of a tragedy that occurred because of irresponsible and untrained handling of a firearm? And as for the argument that the government should get out of the way of this process, that is an absolute mischaracterization of our government's role in this equation. It is the primary responsibility of the government to make sure that its citizens are safe. And not only do I believe in that role, I take part in it. Years ago, I became a cadet in the Army ROTC program, and now I'm a member of the Army National Guard. And I also belong to the Inkster Police Auxiliary. And as a member of the Michigan Army National Guard and a cadet in the Army ROTC program, I learned how to assemble, disassemble, zero, and qualify with a plethora of firearms. And as a member of the Inkster Auxiliary Police Department, I've learned how to properly recognize, handle, disarm, and store a number of weapons. So to completely eliminate the safety aspect is a slap in the face of my brothers and sisters in blue and in the military to say that just anyone can carry a loaded firearm, anytime, anywhere, and with no training and with no license. So I stand in solidarity with the law enforcement community in their opposition to this legislation. And I urge my colleagues in this chamber to take your responsibility to ensure the safety and the well-being of your constituents into consideration and to vote no on these bills. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. The chair recognizes Representative Runstead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of this bill. The irony of some of the comments I heard about black and brown people and how this will impact them, the gun laws in many cases were instituted primarily to prevent African Americans from having weapons. Under Michigan law, a current law-abiding citizen who is permitted to be in possession of a firearm and who is lawfully in possession of a firearm is allowed to carry that firearm openly. A law-abiding citizen in Michigan can carry a weapon openly under their constitutional right and do so without training or a fee. However, a law-abiding citizen runs afoul of state laws as soon as a flap of their coat crosses in front of that firearm. Criminals with guns are going to conceal their guns regardless of any state law. Our current laws only affect law-abiding citizens. They don't stop crime. Under current law, a citizen can be criminally charged for concealing a weapon unintentionally, regardless of their intent. Under current law, law-abiding citizen can be criminally charged for transporting an unloaded weapon in the back of a trunk if the handgun is not in a specified manufacturing case to transport a pistol. Why do we have laws in Michigan that criminalize a person with no intent of wrongdoing? I thought we were looking at getting rid of such laws in Michigan. If a person is committed a crime, they will be charged for that crime regardless of whether they have a gun and regardless of whether the clothes are covering that weapon or not. The legislation would repeal these unnecessary criminal penalties for putting on a coat over a gun and prevent unnecessary prosecution when there has been no crime committed. This legislation will help CPL holders because they will now be prompted by law enforcement to disclose rather than having to immediately disclose regardless of circumstance. So instead of somebody being stopped and having to immediately disclose, they don't know why they were stopped, they can instantly, if they don't say their disclosure, be afoul of the law. Now an officer asks and they're required to disclose. It's a better approach. A person who is not allowed to be in possession of a firearm under state or federal law would still not be permitted to be under possession of firearms under this legislation. Seems to be a lot of misunderstanding. If you're a criminal, you cannot go out and purchase a firearm. That does not change. There are 3 reasons that people would still get a CPL in Michigan. 1, for reciprocity with other states. 2, for open carry in specified zones. And 3, the process of firearm purchase is far more efficient with a CPL. Many of my colleagues have asked about training. Well, I'd like to tell you there's no course out there today that is going to make a person safe with a firearm. Firearms are tools, and a person learns to handle them with responsibility and experience. In the states that have passed constitutional carry, there has been an uptick in training, even though that training has not been required. Most people will take the class anyway because they want to clearly understand gun laws. The cost of training will come down and the advertising goes up if it isn't mandatory. That is what we've seen in other states. People choose to take the class on their own because they feel there's some value in these classes. Although taking the class is not a panacea, I'd like to repeat that. Taking the class is not going to solve the problems of those who are irresponsible. Those who want to be appraised of laws that they can violate for carrying a weapon are absolutely going to want to read up on those laws. Those who are not responsible, sitting through a class that they're not interested in and they don't see the value in, is not going to be productive. As an example, this is a very common example across the state of Michigan. A lady was at a Walmart. She took the class. She pulled her weapon and fired at a fleeing shoplifter. Now that, I'm sure, was covered in every single class. You're not to do that. But that shows a person who is uninvolved in the class. Responsibility is taught by families and is taught by communities. Responsibility cannot be legislated in a free society. However, if guns had not been owned and carried by the colonists, this country of free commoners would not have been founded. Societies that allow people to carry are not violent societies. They are free societies, and societies become safe when people's rights are protected and not infringed upon. And I hope you will join me in supporting this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. The chair recognizes Representative Hoadley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, as the good representative from Midland noted, House Bill 4416 raises questions about gun violence in America. We are approaching the 1-year anniversary of the Pulse nightclub massacre, which was the deadliest shooting incident on American soil, where 49 people were killed and 53 more were injured. And the question of gun violence is at the front of my mind. because we have a problem with gun violence in America. In 2016, over 15,000 people lost their lives in incidents involving firearms. Now, I know, as we all know, that nearly 2/3 of those were due to suicide. That's not what we're talking about. And according to a recent report in MLive, about 3 people lose their lives every day in Michigan because of gun violence. So we have to do something about this problem. So that's the lens that I'm applying to House Bill 4416, the no training to carry bills. Because the question is, will this bill do something to make our state and our community safer? But first, I do want to just address some of the proponents' arguments. The argument that this is a coat tax, I want to say that is a very catchy phrase, and so I give a significant amount of credit. But this is about, it's not just about 1 millimeter of clothing, because we're talking about guns in cars, we're talking about guns in purses, we're talking about guns in backpacks. This is as much a coat tax as a fee for a marriage license is a walking down the aisle tax. Our current CPL process has a fee for licensure that pays for the workers who monitor the application process. And if you want the responsibilities of marriage, you intentionally get the license. If you want the responsibilities of carrying concealed, you intentionally get the permit. And getting a permit's a good thing. To those who argue that we don't need permits because of big government or the mandatory training courses, I hope they remember that the next time that we're driving down 94, right? I'm so glad that we have licensures and folks who've had a chance to have those permits. In this final argument about the accidental criminals, the argument from the advocates is that we need to pass this legislation because we shouldn't close the loopholes that let criminals carry, but rather we should make it easier for those criminals to carry legally. So when you look at those arguments, House Bill 4416 fails. But in all seriousness, the thing that's, I think, most frustrating about these debates is that we're talking past each other a lot of the time. Because we all swore an oath to protect the Constitution, the Second Amendment included. We all want ourselves to be secure, and we all want our families to be safe. I have no doubt that that is something that we all agree on. But then instead we're talking about catchphrases and coat taxes as opposed to solutions to gun violence. We have proponents of the bills and opponents have offered solutions that would improve the system without dismantling the safeguards that exists. So in deciding how to vote, I talked to a lot of folks who carry, both concealed and openly. And I've spoken to the men and the women who keep us safe, who've chosen to protect and serve. And I've spoken to prosecutors about, the folks that have to deal with who break the law. And I've spoken to my partner, who's the gun owner in the home, extensively about these issues. I haven't seen the rash of prosecutions that proponents are claiming. I haven't encountered a swath of folks who can't go through those basic requirements, and I haven't heard of why in a shall-issue state we need less training and more criminals carrying. What I've seen is law enforcement raising very serious questions about their ability to protect and serve, as there'll be more guns in more places with less training. According to one former state trooper, data from the Michigan State Police notes 2,500 people were denied CPLs, although allowed to own guns, because under current Michigan law, people recently convicted of stalking, criminal sexual conduct, indecent exposure, certain drug crimes, and more than one drunk driving offense were prohibited from getting their CPLs. But they would be allowed to carry. What I've seen is that the outpouring of folks who raise serious concerns that people without training may now bring very powerful and potentially dangerous tools around their children unbeknownst to them, which is different than what we currently do. A member of the Fraternal Order of Police was recently quoted in the Detroit News as saying, "To put a firearm in the hands of someone with no required training is absolutely absurd." So today, I'm going to stand up here with law enforcement and advocates for the Second Amendment and moms who are demanding safety for their children, gun owners, lovers of liberty and freedom, business owners, and reasonable people from all sides of the debate who think these bills don't make sense. I'll be voting no, and I encourage folks to join me. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Speaker Pro Tem Chatfield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this bill, and for the purpose of avoiding to be dilatory, I will seek to make my comments simply in things that have not been mentioned yet. I want to address some of the concerns that have been raised from representatives on both sides of the aisle, and I'm particularly interested and excited about speaking to this legislation because I was one of the primary sponsors of these bills last year. I truly believe that any day we have the opportunity in our state as a legislative body to uphold the constitutional rights that have already been provided to people and are enumerated not only in our state constitution but our federal constitution is a good day in our legislature. In fact, I wish we did this every single day. Now, first, I want to reference some of the questions that have been asked by some of the sponsors or some of the people who spoke to this legislation. The question was just brought up: will this make our communities safer? I wholeheartedly believe allowing law-abiding citizens the opportunity to have the same freedoms that criminals already do in this state will make our communities safer. As a father of 5 children, I am very concerned about the safety of my family. I truly believe that by having the opportunity to conceal a firearm or open carry provides me the opportunity to protect them. But it's important to understand, when we're speaking of gun laws and we use the word criminals, let's all acknowledge this fact. Criminals do not obey the law. Criminals don't obey the gun laws we have on the books now, and criminals will not obey any new legislation that we pass. That is why we call them criminals. So what we have is a society where criminals get to conceal carry wherever they would like without training because they have no regard for the law. And our law-abiding citizens are the ones who have restrictions put on their constitutional rights. I've also heard it asked, why are we getting rid of the permit required to carry a firearm? The debate here and the confusion is not whether or not we believe that you need a permit to carry a firearm. In fact, I believe you do. The confusion seems to be where the permit comes from. I believe this Michigan Constitution that I had brought to my desk about 5 minutes ago is your permit. Now let me read for you. The Second Amendment has been referenced and quoted a couple times. Let me read for you the very brief Article 1, Section 6 in our Michigan Constitution when it talks about firearms. Every person has a right to keep and bear arms for the defense of himself and the state. Now, what you don't find in the Michigan Constitution is a requirement for training. What you don't find in the Michigan Constitution is a fee that you have to pay to exercise your freedom. Now, as was mentioned by my colleague from Bay County who gave a brilliant history on the Bill of Rights, William Blackstone's commentaries on the laws of England, which our U.S. Constitution and Declaration of Independence are largely built upon, let me reiterate this to you, because there seems to be some confusion about what constitutional rights are. Our Declaration of Independence clearly understands that our rights, our constitutional rights, don't come from the government. Our right to defend ourselves comes from our Creator. The purpose of government is to secure those rights. The Declaration says we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The next line is this, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Let's not become so drunk with our power here in this legislature that we think we are actually the ones that decide what rights our people have. Rights come from the Creator. We are here to secure them. Now, referencing that Constitution, it's the Constitution that all of us, if you're serving in this body, we're required to take an oath to uphold. Today's a good day. Today's the day you get to vote for the Constitution. If we don't require training and a freedom fee to exercise your First Amendment rights, Why do we do it? For our Second Amendment rights. I encourage all my colleagues to support this legislation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Question before the House is the passage of the bill. A record roll call vote is required. All those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. The clerk will open the board.
Members, the board is still open. You may vote at your desk. The clerk will close the board. Representative Robinson votes. Representative Robinson votes nay. Representative Lasada votes aye. Representative Iden votes aye. Representative Howrelak votes nay. The clerk will tally, display, and announce the vote.
Mr. Speaker, on the question of final passage of House Bill 4416, there are 59 aye votes and 49 nay votes.
A majority of the members elected and serving having voted therefore, the bill is passed. The chair recognizes Majority Floor Leader Lowers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for immediate effect.
The Majority Floor Leader moves for immediate effect. All in favor will rise. Immediate effect is ordered. The chair recognizes Majority Floor Leader Lowers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House continue on the order of third reading of bills and take up calendar item number 14, House Bill 4417.
Without objection, so ordered. The clerk will read.
Calendar item number 14, House Bill number 4417, introduced by Representative Hornberger. A bill to amend an act to regulate and license the selling, purchasing, possessing, and carrying of certain firearms. People of the State of Michigan, an act.
Without objection, the bill will be considered read for a third time by its title. Are there amendments? There are amendments. The clerk will read.
Representative Lilly offers an amendment identified as amendment number 1.
On third reading, amendments require support. Is there support? The clerk will open the board. There is support. The question before the House is adoption of the amendment. Amendments require support. The clerk will open the board. The amendment is adopted. Are there further amendments? There being no further amendments, the question before the House is the passage of the bill. A record roll call vote is required. All those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will open the board. Members, the board is now open. You may vote at your desk. Members, the board is now open. You may vote at your desk. Members, the board is still open. You may vote at your desk. The clerk will close the board. Representative Durhal votes nay. Representative Hoadley votes nay. Minority Leader Singh votes. Minority Leader Singh votes nay. The clerk will tally, display, and announce the vote.
Mr. Speaker, on the question of final passage of House Bill 4417, there are 60 aye votes, 48 nay votes.
A majority of the members elected and serving having voted therefore, the bill is passed. The chair recognizes Majority Floor Leader Lowers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for immediate effect.
The Majority Floor Leader moves for immediate effect. All in favor will rise. Immediate effect is ordered. The chair recognizes Majority Floor Leader Lowers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Continuing on the order of third reading of bills, to move the House take up calendar item number 15, House Bill 4418.
Without objection, so ordered. The clerk will read.
Calendar item number 15, House Bill number 4418, introduced by Representative Aller. A bill to amend the Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act. People of the State of Michigan enact.
Without objection, the bill will be considered read for a third time by its title. Are there amendments? There being no amendments, the question before the House is the passage of the bill. A record roll call vote is required. All those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will open the board. Members, the board is now open. You may vote at your desk. Members, the board is still open. You may vote at your desk. The clerk will close the board. Representative Durhal votes nay. Minority Leader Singh votes nay. The clerk will tally, display, and announce the vote.
Mr. Speaker, on the question of final passage of House Bill 4418, there are 59 aye votes and 49 nay votes.
A majority of the members elected and serving having voted therefore, the bill is passed. The chair recognizes Majority Floor Leader Lowers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for immediate effect.
The Majority Floor Leader moves for immediate effect. All in favor will rise. Immediate effect is ordered. The chair recognizes Majority Floor Leader Lowers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Continuing on the order of third reading of bills, to move the House take up calendar item number 16, House Bill 4419.
Without objection, so ordered. The clerk will read.
Calendar item number 16, House Bill number 4419, introduced by Representative Cole. A bill to amend the Code of Criminal Procedure, the people of the State of Michigan enact.
Without objection, the bill will be considered read for a third time by its title. Are there amendments? There being no amendments, the question before the House is the passage of the bill. A record roll call vote is required. All those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will open the board. Members, the board is now open. You may vote at your desk. Members, the board is still open. You may vote at your desk. Members, the board is still open. You may vote at your desk. The clerk will close the board. Representative Jones votes nay. Representative Durhal votes nay. Representative Wittenberg votes nay. Representative Santana votes nay. Clerk will tally, display, and announce the vote.
Mr. Speaker, on the question of final passage of House Bill 4419, there are 61 aye votes and 47 nay votes.
A majority of the members elected and serving having voted therefore, the bill is passed. The chair recognizes Majority Floor Leader Lowers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for immediate effect.
The Majority Floor Leader moves for immediate effect. All in favor will rise. Immediate effect is ordered.